So the interesting thing about mind identification is that when it is happening, when there is unconscious, habitual, immersive identification with thoughts and mental reflections and narratives, there is not even awareness about that. That's how pervasive that condition is. So even hearing then terms like believing thoughts or um, being identified with self-images, they are heard from this state where everything is immediately and habitually co-opted by this hall of mirrors, like mental reflections reflecting each other's, like thought reflecting each other's, and constantly constructing an artificial reality, like a virtual reality that feels like reality. And it's like any instruction to pierce through conceptualization or move beyond the mind or step back from the thought processes sounds almost like an impossibility because, well, first of all, we can't see this condition for what it is as long as it's happening. And then when there starts to be kind of like acute awareness about the discomfort of this condition, which is then called dukkha or discontent or suffering, which means that we actually are now able to address it when there's awareness about the discomfort. But it still seems like a mission impossible because the only way the mind can understand it, that it needs to do something to get rid of something, to change something about the experience, and then it can easily result in this type of inner conflicts, like thoughts attacking other thoughts and kind of like inner sense of war, so to speak. So hearing this message of non-conceptuality, of this open boundlessness, and this simplicity, this effortless simplicity and natural immediacy prior to any thought, it's purely intuitive. It's purely intuitive. So something in us hears that message, like in a very visceral manner, because that which is already awake, that which is immediately present and primordially pure and free, prior to becoming, prior to constructing the virtual reality, that resonates with that message. That resonates with the place where the message is coming from. So it's not about understanding the words correctly. It's not about understanding at all. In a conscious level, it may appear like understanding of something that is being communicated about non-duality and being interested or intrigued about it. But in a non-conceptual level, it's actually about something more fundamental, which is like a basic felt direct resonance, a reality resonating with itself. So the more discomfort there is about this condition, about mind contracting around mental processes and being immersed in mental reflections, kind of compulsively creating an internal virtual reality, the more discomfort and dissatisfaction and lack of content we feel about that condition, it's actually very constructive in regards to waking up to reality. But it's important to feel that discomfort directly, prior to the identity hijacking it and making it this seeking quest of trying to get rid of thoughts or trying to get out of the discomfort or trying to manipulate the thoughts. So we need to catch that initial, anxiety, this existential anxiety, which it really is, this illness of thinking, of mind identification, how it feels in the body, like how it feels in the nervous system, how it feels in your direct experience. So don't try to do anything about it. Don't try to escape it. Don't try to distract yourself out of it. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't try to analyze it. Just see if it's possible to relax and turn towards that felt sense of resistance, which it actually is. So there's this resistance barrier that we need to face when we start to address suffering in our direct experience. Now I'm speaking about suffering as the mind identification. And when these fundamental shifts at the identity level start to occur, at the perceptual level, that are sometimes called awakening shifts, but they are nothing like the mind could ever anticipate or expect or project. Because in the virtual reality, whatever the mind will imagine that awakening is, it's not going to be that, because it is exactly reality kind of starting to dissolve that fundamental kind of cloud of obscuration that appears like you are a person, someone who was born, someone who will die, someone who lives in an actual world, which is objective and exterior, and there you are as a separate person. So all of that is actually just the condensed mind fog. But now I'm speaking mind with capital letter. So it's confusion, right? It's just this ignorance of mistaking the mind reality, the reality of the reflections, of the distorted reflections, to be something that it's not. So when that starts to dissolve or vanish, it feels like the radiance of this clarity, of this piercing, stark, empty presence, it kind of like clears the sky. And it literally feels like, waking up from a dream, like being immersed in this dualistic dream of mind identification without even awareness that that's all it ever was. So in the same way, like the dream disappears in the morning and you realize it was a dream, in the same way, this dualistic fog, it just like pops into this immaculate openness as if it never really was there. So this is kind of like clarity, this timeless clarity, like shining through. And then it reappears, the obscurations, the distortions, the mental processes, the attachments, the fixations. So this process of clearing out this delusive hindrance in our experience is not about just having a like insight that magically clears the experience, and that's it. Like the insight, yes, it's about our fundamental nature. It's about realizing that you were never the thoughts. You were never these images of a person that you thought yourself to be. You were never there, ever, as anything that the mind was constructing and describing and defining that you are. Like you're simply not there as anything definable at all, as anything actually existing. And yet there is this presence, this experienceless experiencing, this empty, vivid appearance. So yeah, that's the insight. You see that you are not that which you thought yourself to be. And then it reappears, the narrative self and the ordinary mind. So that's when the practice actually begins, like the real practice. Because then you learn to recognize that this immediacy, this open boundlessness is always here, even when the thought processes are occurring. And that will then start to dissolve that pervasive Velcro effects between mental processes and beliefs and mental reflections and our direct felt somatic reality, like emotions, sensations. So when you start to deconstruct that effect, then this whole dualistic dream starts to dissolve, in a fundamental manner. But it is a process. It is a process of clearing out, of deepening clarification, and like this insight is being put into practice effortlessly and spontaneously, again and again and again and again. So it's a completely different thing to have this insight that you are not the narrative self, and to go through this process of liberation, which means that the very structure that keeps the narrative self reappearing, that is being dismantled. So not only the narrative self is seen to be empty of inherent existence, but it is actually like annihilated. It's dissolved. It collapses when we have genuine realization of emptiness and anatta. So those two things are not comparable. Like the initial insight that shows the absence of inherent reality, in the narrative self, but it still keeps appearing. It still stabilizes your experience, even though you can't believe in it anymore, even though you recognize that what you actually are is not that, but it still keeps appearing. And then having this deeper shift happening, which is the emptiness in a very visual and actual manner, that where there used to be this psychic center constantly feeding mental processes, like that is being dissolved. And then there is this vast open unknowability where there used to be the self-construct, self-center, and a process of a narrative self that constantly found some sort of platform there in that sense of I. And to make this even more paradoxical, is not so simple as it sounds. Like in a way, it is astonishingly, ridiculously clear when you see that there never was an I. So when that thing dissolves, it's kind of like you just see there's no one here. There never was anyone here. There never was separation. There never was awakening. There is only this unconditioned, empty appearance, this timeless beauty. But the self-construct and the deeply rooted habits and social conditionings that were rooted on that fundamental self-view, they don't just disappear from our embodied experience just because of this structural shift appears. So that's why there is a process of clearing afterwards and a kind of process of deconditioning, because the remnants of the conditioning in our system, they stand in such stark contrast to this unfiltered, raw presence, this direct immediacy and sensitivity and aliveness and power, this dynamic reality that experiences itself now directly through the body mind. So the remnants of these type of thought processes, they start to feel like friction in this state, which is non-conceptual. So now I'm talking about thought processes that are connected to the identity that is not there anymore, or connected to some deeply rooted beliefs about reality. So those are the kind of thought processes that cause friction. So there can still be thinking when that is needed, that is totally transparent and seamless and in a certain sense effortless, even though I would say that engaging with concepts is always slightly exhausting, but those kind of thinking processes or concepts that are just part of the natural functioning, they appear as open presence, as this empty presence. So the difference between that and then those Vasanas, let's say, when they move through, is quite obvious, because you feel that. You feel very viscerally and somatically that raw quality, of the energy body, of the felt sense of reality, when something starts to move through, that has a sense of obscuration to it, that has a sense of grasping, that has a sense of pushing and pulling, that there's confusion trapped in there. So then that's basically this process that follows deep realization, is this ever deepening clarification and refinement, where meeting those places in our body mind experience that that are still kind of like executing a programming, even though the host is dead. So the self view is the host. So without that, this virtual reality cannot function anymore. It cannot reproduce itself anymore. But there's some charge left to it, and there's some remnants, like slight subtle remnants of that old programming left, and they need to be cleared out. So it's quite physical at this point, how it feels like, quite energetic. And at some point, when you realize that resistance in itself is empty, so that fundamental belief that something needs to be done about the experience for it to correct it somehow, when you see that that's just a belief and reality arises naturally as liberation, ceaselessly, even when this type of clearing out happens, because that will continue as long as there's a body mind. That's when this deep fundamental ease becomes so all-pervasive, that it's kind of like the whole story just starts to disappear completely. Awakening, liberation, suffering, like all of it. So mind identification, it's a condition that can only be seen for what it is when it is not there anymore. And it can only be addressed when there is conscious awareness about that condition. So as long as the identification is so immersive that there's not even awareness about it, yeah, we don't even register that there could be such a thing as awakening or liberation, other than, as a story in the dream, as a maybe spiritual exotic story about something called awakening that some rare people undergo, but it doesn't occur to us at all, that this possibility can be actualized by anyone who hears this message of non-duality.